Hey guys, welcome to my first drive video on BMW's i4. Here in the UK, the i4 starts with the eDrive 40 Sport. That retails at £52,000 and has 340 horsepower. The range topper, which is this one, the M50, retails at £64,000. These are base prices before you add options and packages. And this has 544 horsepower via its two motors, one on the front axle and one on the rear axle. The base model 40 just has a motor on the rear axle. The figures don't stop there either. This has 795 Newton meters of torque, which is just ridiculous. And being electric, obviously that power figure and that torque figure are basically available instantaneously, unlike with, let's say, my M3, where the power and torque figures are specific parts of the RPM, if you like. It's not an M car, this is an M performance version of the i4. Its acceleration figures are impressive, but they're not mind-blowing. BMW claim it will do the 0 to 62 sprint in 3.9 seconds, which is about half a second slower than the current M3 competition X-Drive, and that car has 35 horsepower less and 150 Newton meters less torque. So how does that happen? How does that work? Because this is also all-wheel drive. It has that instantaneous power and torque as we talked about. I'll tell you how it happens. Weight. This car weighs over 2.2 tons. It's 2,215 kilos without a driver. To put that into perspective, that's about 400 kilos heavier than a 7 Series long wheelbase. In fact, it's heavier than an X5 40i. And that's why its performance figures aren't quite as impressive as they should be. Now, in terms of styling, well, looks are subjective. And this particular car is based on the current 3 Series chassis, although, as you can probably tell, its shell is, well, it's pretty much a 4 Series Grand Coupe, like that aventurine red one that I tried out in Germany recently. I really think that this Portimao blue frozen paintwork does it a lot of favours. Obviously, I'm a fan of Portimao blue, and I think the frozen element really does show a lot more of the angles and lines on this design. This also has BMW's controversial grille that we first saw on cars like the 4 Series. Obviously, this doesn't need those big grilles, but I think it kind of suits this car. And as an overall package, well, it's not my cup of tea. I'd rather see it in a 3 Series shape, but it's not a bad looking car. What I'm not impressed with is the fact that they've gone ahead and used full M door mirror caps, just like they have on the flagship M440i Grand Coupe and cars like the M240i X-Drive. I think those door mirror caps should be reserved for real M cars. This flagship M50 has optional 20-inch wheels. In fact, it has a lot of optional extras, being a press car, and I would hazard a guess that this has a retail price of about £75,000. Also on the flagship M50, you get wider tracks front and rear, and you can see that BMW have had to add these wheel arch spats. Now, I don't usually like them on a lot of cars because they've been a bit of an afterthought, but I like the way they've color coded these ones to the body color, and actually I think they improve the look of the car a little bit, but I'll leave the jury out for that one. This car also has the new style door handles that I've seen on the 4 Series Grand Coupe and the new 2 Series. They look fantastic, lovely and flush with the bodywork, and I'm sure they do a lot for the aero or the coefficient of the car, but in terms of the way they sort of work or the way you use them, I'm not sold. I don't like them. They don't feel as good and as natural as the older style traditional door handles on BMWs. And of course, when you get around the back, well, you have the i4 badging and no exhaust, so you just sort of have a continuous diffuser that has surrounds where maybe the exhausts once were. In terms of practicalities, well, we have a rather large boot at 470 litres, and because it's sort of a Grand Coupe or almost hatchback style car, it's a really usable space. Obviously folding down the rear seats opens that up massively and allows you to throw things like bikes and furniture in really easily. And that's where the Grand Coupe shape, if you like, is much better than a regular 3 Series in the saloon, where you've got a limited opening and you can put limited size items in there. Where the i4 and cars like the 4 Series Grand Coupe really struggle is rear cabin space. I've seen a couple of videos on these already where people seem to skim over the rear cabin or actually say that it's not that bad, but in my opinion, it's really not that great. I am 6'4" and that is my driving position, but I do like to sit nice and close to the wheel, so it's not like I have it all the way back on the rails. And I know that most rear seat occupants aren't going to be my height, and you know, if it's for your kids or for smaller adults, you might just about get away with it. But there's more to it than just lack of space. When you open the rear doors for the first time, you start to see what I'm on about, because the door opening itself, it's absolutely tiny. I mean, it's barely bigger than my forearm. So getting in is a little bit of a challenge. And once you're in, well, I have to take my bobble hat off for one, because my head is just rammed up against the headlining. It's really uncomfortable in here. The rear seats, well, they're ergonomically not set right. I just don't like it. It's not a nice or comfortable place to sit. It's quite claustrophobic back here because, well, the windows are very small. And in fact, when you close the door, if you could sit back, you'd just be looking at the C-pillar. I think that's really badly designed. So if I stoop down, pretend that I'm a little bit shorter and my head is on the headrest, if I look to the right, I'm looking straight at the C-pillar. So it's not ideal in here, it really isn't. My knees are hurting, my feet are jammed under the seat in front of me. In terms of space for adults back here, it really is limited. I have got 3-zone climate here. I'm not sure if that's standard. I'm sure it is on the M50, and there are a couple of USB-C charging points down there, which is a good thing and something you would expect on a car of this sort of price point. Well, ignoring that massive curved display in front of me, it feels very BMW in here, which is a good thing. Driving position is very similar to most 3 and 4 Series. I do feel like I'm sitting a little bit higher, but I did think that in the 4 Series Grand Coupe when I tried that out in Germany. Everything else, well, the fit and finish in here is lovely. The quality is absolute top notch. I've got a very familiar looking steering wheel. There are some blue accents down here, the start-stop button, the actual gear lever. Can you call it a gear lever anymore? A drive lever, I guess. That's also got some blue accents on it, just to let you know that you are in an EV, I guess. Let's talk about this curve display that we've got in front of us. It's actually 2 separate screens, so very similar to the Merc one. It is driver centric, so it's curved towards me, which is pretty cool. And the graphics and how fast it is from the little time that I've had with it is incredible. So this is the latest operating system 8, so essentially iDrive 8. And obviously it's got a number of extra features which I'm not going to go into today because I don't really know what I'm talking about with it, and I'm sure there's other videos online that go into the tech in far greater detail, and this video really is about the drive that we will get to very shortly. It's great to see down here that we've still got the old-fashioned iDrive controller. That is just a must-have for me. What they have changed though, unfortunately, and I'm a bit gutted about this, is they've removed the climate control buttons and they've added them to the touchscreen display. I think that's just frustrating. There's no way that that works better than buttons. I know why they've done it, to modernize the interior, so this is starting to look less and less like BMWs of old. But yeah, realistically, in terms of the way it works, well, I can tell you now that that is going to be more frustrating than plain buttons and dials like they used to be. Something else that really doesn't float my boat is the display in front of me. Obviously you can cycle through different modes and that changes color and shape and stuff, but just like every dashboard layout in current BMWs, I just don't like them. I wish they'd go back to circular dials. I'm really not the biggest fan of this, but otherwise, as I say, the graphics and stuff are really nice. It doesn't have anything over the top shading it because apparently this particular glass has some kind of anti-reflection on it. So hopefully it shouldn't produce too many reflections when you're on the move. Today, well, it's a very grey day in Farnborough, so I won't be experiencing any of that and I won't be able to test that particular feature. Let's get this car out on the road because I've literally got it for a couple hours and I've already spent half of that time obviously doing the intro. And the main thing for me today with this car is getting under its skin and seeing if it has any BMW DNA in terms of, well, handling, dynamics and driver feel. It was at 100%, it's now at 99%, and it's showing me 241 miles. It's quite mild today at 13 degrees. I think BMW claimed this to do 315 miles on the WLTP combined cycle, but that's already proving that wrong at 240 miles. And I mean, like all EVs, they never do the range that they claim. But let's see if we can get close to that today in the nice little loop that we've got. So I'm going to switch these cameras off. I'm going to spend half an hour on the road with this car, and then I'll turn them back on once I've understood it a little bit more and hopefully give you my first driving impressions. You join me exactly half an hour later, and I've spent some time in town, I've spent some time on dual carriageway and the motorway, so it's 70 odd miles an hour, and the majority of the journey so far I've been in comfort. This car has adaptive suspension, and I'm really going to start with the positives around this car because it's no secret that I'm not the most excited about the future and electric cars in general. Sure, they tick a few boxes, but I'm just a little bit skeptical about them, especially when it comes to driver involvement and driver engagement. And I know that they're supposedly here to save the planet, and that's obviously nothing to do with driver involvement, but I'm really hoping that BMW have injected some of their goodness into this car to make it a exciting car to drive. A bit like Porsche have done with the Taycan. To date, that is the most impressive and exciting EV I've ever driven. But let's just talk about the normal stuff first. Let's talk about what my journey has been like with this car up until this point today, what it was like on the dual carriageway and around town. Well, I can say that in terms of ride quality, etc., it's really, really good. So this car has the optional 20-inch wheels, but it seems to iron out pretty much everything. All the roads I've been on have felt really good, including this one, and I can see that the surface of this road is, well, it's a typical British B road. It's not particularly brilliant, but this car seems to take it in its stride. Other positives are how quiet it is in here. It really is amazing in terms of insulation. You don't hear any wind noise even at 70 miles an hour. Didn't hear that car go past just then, for instance. And you don't get any tyre roar either. They're big tyres. The rear is a 285 section, so the same size as my M3 competition, and the front's a 255 section, but you really don't get any tyre roar in here. And that is impressive in an EV, because if you haven't driven an EV before, obviously you don't get any of that combustion engine sound, so you hear absolutely everything. Any cabin creaks or squeaks? None at all, thankfully, because if there was, you would hear them much more so than if this was a traditional combustion engine car. So ride quality, really good. In terms of, yes, sound insulation, lack of tyre roar, really, really good. I have to say, very impressed, and typical for a EV of today's world. It's a really nice and relaxing place to sit and spend time in. Yes, you would start to have range anxiety like you do in most if you do longer journeys like I do, and I know that I'm in the minority. Not many people do many journeys over 200 miles, and this car probably has a realistic range of about 250 miles driven sensibly, and I think that's just about borderline acceptable. And the i440, well, that has a range, probably realistic range of about 280 miles, because it's a little bit lighter and it doesn't have a motor on the front axle. So realistically, the 40 is probably going to be all the car that anyone ever needs, because, well, we'll talk about performance in a minute, straight line performance, and this has almost got too much for the public road. It's very, very quick. In terms of this new curve display, well, it seems to work okay. As we talked about when I first jumped in, I really don't like the fact that they put the climate control on here, because I don't care what anyone says. Yes, I can control it with my voice, but I'm not going to do that. I mean, I don't want to talk to my car, I just want to press a button or turn a dial. And unfortunately, this touchscreen stuff, it's just a little bit overcomplicated for me, but I'm sure the younger generation are going to really enjoy it. Now that we've got all of the practical and ordinary stuff out of the way, let's put it into sport. There's a few different sports. There's sport boost, there's sport individual, which you can configure yourself. So let's try sport boost, because that's ramped right up. I've got it in drive. If you push it over to what we think of as traditionally the sports automatic setting, you get a B, and that is basically more regen. So I think B stands for brakes. So you can essentially drive the i4 on one pedal. When you start releasing the throttle pedal, you get lots of regen, and therefore you get lots of brake. In fact, that's just regen. You know, the car will come to a stop very easily, and in fact, if you time it right, you should never have to use the brake pedal. But I prefer to have it more of a natural feeling in drive, so when I come off the throttle, it just coasts. It feels much more normal and ordinary to me doing that. And then obviously you use the brake pedal just as you would do in any normal car. I don't have paddles here, I keep reaching down for them, but obviously I don't have that. The first time you put your foot down, I mean, it's really quick. I don't have my timing gear with me today, but I'm in no doubt that this would match or beat BMW's claimed 3.9 seconds to 62 miles an hour, because it's just so fast. And off the line, I've done it a few times at launch control, it just gets up and goes each and every time. Launch control active, boom. I mean, because that is maximum power and maximum torque from the off. You're not going to get that in a M3 or an M5 or any combustion engine hypercar, supercar. You just don't get that. You don't get that maximum torque and maximum power from zero, essentially. So that's why EVs are so fast and their figures look so good. But, and this is the big but, we all talk about acceleration figures with EVs these days, because that's kind of all of the excitement they have. That's their one-trick pony, if you like. They're very fast in a straight line, but none of them tend to be that amazing or that fun through the twisties. Again, aside from the Taycan, which I think is really, really impressive and definitely better than Audi's RS e-tron GT. What's this like in the corners? Well, it's not that great. The steering feel is okay, it's not bad, but there's just, it just feels so heavy. Yes, it doesn't roll around because of the really complex suspension system and the fact that all the weight is down low, but every change in direction, every time you hit the accelerator or the brake, you can just feel that momentum, that mass. I was at Bedford a week ago in my M3. I could do 6-7 hot laps in that car before temperatures go through the roof. I reckon I wouldn't get more than 2 hot laps in this car before it started to self-combust, because it's just so heavy. It really is. I've never been much of a runner, but when I did used to go out jogging, let's say 3 years ago, and I weighed 93, 94 kilos, you know, I had a bit of extra body mass, but it was okay. If I try and do it now, I'm about 107 kilos, I can just feel myself jiggling. I can feel my belly, and I'm just carrying weight everywhere. And it doesn't feel great. And that's what this car feels like. It feels like it jiggles its way down the road. It gets from A to B really quickly, but it kind of jiggles from A to B really quickly. Just talk you through what I'm feeling. I mean, unbelievable pace, you know, so fast, but you're at the speed limit in seconds, and that's not necessarily what we want. In fact, at the moment, I'm looking at something like a Fiesta ST or the Hyundai i20N as an exciting road car in addition to the channel, because those cars with their 200 horsepower, you can rag them on the public road and you're never really breaking the speed limit. Whereas something like my M3, well, it's almost too fast for the road when you start pushing it. And this, because of that instantaneous pickup, it's just way too quick. You put your foot down for literally 1 second and you're at the speed limit. So do you need all this straight line performance? I'm sure that's going to entertain and please many buyers for the i4 M50, but for me, it's more about the handling dynamics and feel. And this car, I don't care what anyone says, it just doesn't have it. It's not as numb as I was thinking it might be. It definitely feels somewhat relatable to a normal BMW, but it's not a BMW M car. Comparing this to, say, my M2 competition, absolute night and day. The M2 competition is alive, it feels great, you can feel everything going on underneath you, and that's still a heavy car. But this, at over 2.2 tons, well, it's over 2.3 with me in the driver's seat. It's so heavy. And unfortunately, as well as they have disguised that weight, you can still feel it when you start pushing on. You can feel it on the brakes, you can feel it out of corners. It's fast as you like when you put your foot on the accelerator, but as soon as you turn in, you can just feel that momentum wanting to carry on in a straight line and not turn in. It will turn, but it doesn't do it in a nice in a nice way that something like my M3 would do. So I guess my conclusion on this car is it's more impressive to drive than I thought, but my expectations were not particularly high. It does a great job at being a car, at getting you from A to B in comfort and silence. I mean, the tech in here is lovely. As we talked about, the fit and finish, typically BMW, it's beautiful in here. But my argument to that would be, why not save yourself 12 grand and go for the base model 40 or 40M Sport? Because you're soon going to get over that ridiculous speed and realize that actually you're just going to end up losing your license if you're too heavy on the throttle pedal. And the base model is still very, very quick, especially by road car standards. It's got a bigger range, it's cheaper, as we talked about. So although this is a car that's got some bragging rights that you can take down to your pub, well, if restrictions allow, obviously, I don't really get this movement that all manufacturers are doing, where they're trying to make EVs appear and seem like they're far more exciting than they actually are. Because once you get over the acceleration, just like in a Tesla or any of the fast EVs, once you've got over that, the rest of the package is a bit underwhelming for me. And that's because, you know, I love a driver's car. I love a manual rear-wheel drive driver's car. So I am probably the minority, and I know there's probably a few of you watching this going, oh, he just complains about EVs all the time. But I'm just being honest. I'm giving you my absolute honest opinion on this car. I know there's people out there that think BMW pay me, their marketing teams pay me to promote their cars. I wish that was the case. In fact, I unfortunately can't get a set of valve caps out of their marketing team. And I'm hoping that watching this video, you'll soon realize, because this is BMW's future, that I clearly don't get paid by their marketing team. And I'm very honest about everything I get my hands on. I can be now because I've got a lovely big audience that does allow me to have a bit of clout when it comes to getting cars. And on that note, if you haven't subscribed already, please hit the subscription button and the bell icon for more content coming very soon. I'm sorry this has been a very rushed first drive video, but they always are. I'm glad that I've managed to finally get my hands on one of these cars and actually give you guys and girls a little bit of feedback as to what I think of it. But yeah, I guess I'm sitting on the fence. It's a decent car. Hopefully they do one with the 3 Series shape or 3 Series Touring or something, an i3 Touring. That would be a cool car, and something that in the future I'd probably look at getting if we're forced into it. Obviously it's all about what makes sense in the here and now, and you know, if you've got a big double garage with a fast charger at home and your commute is 100 miles or whatever or less, then an EV makes perfect sense in this day and age, because fuel prices are shooting through the roof and the governments are making it more and more difficult for ICE cars to exist. So I get why people are buying these, I really do. And you know, as a viable daily, well, it's a really, really good, nice bit of kit. Guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my honest review on this i4 M50. I will see you at another video coming very, very soon. Cheers. How? How is that so small? Look at the size of it. Unbelievable.